back. Thank you so much for listening to the Omi Show. I'm excited because my guest for the day, she's the Managing Director and Global Head of Philanthropy for the North America region for JPMorgan Chase, and so much more. I'm so honored to welcome to the Omi Show my mentor, inspiration, and friend, Alicia Wilson. Welcome to the Omi Show.
Thank you. You think you're my mentor. You are my mentor.
I am we've been rocking for a while now. I'm so excited to jump into this conversation because anytime somebody asks me what is a quote you're inspired by, or what is some advice that somebody gave you, I always say, be all that you are as soon as possible. And I never forgot that. You shared that with me years ago at this point. And so I'm gonna bring that to you today. So you gave me that quote. What does that quote mean to you? Be all that you are as soon as possible.
So, I think and first of all, let me just say thank you, Omi, not just for having me on this show, but for the platform that you created for so many of us and the work that you do every day that just supports Black women and Black people. And so just, I honor you for that. I would say that quote really is centered in the fact that so many of us try to be something else other than ourselves for so long. We try to fit into the boxes of comfort for other people. We try to fit into the boxes of convenience that we think will allow for us to excel. And really, the thing that allows us to differentiate ourselves from others, the thing that is the special ingredient for us at this time on earth, is for us to be our full selves as soon as possible. And so if a young girl can come into herself as soon as she can, the woman that she will become will be very different than if she has to delay that until she is well past her bloom of youth. So I just think it's really important to center people, and especially women, in the fact that you must be who you are. And the more comfortable you are with that, the sooner you're comfortable with that, the more you are going to be able to bless this world with the unique gifts that only you can contribute to it.
I love that. And I know we have a million things to talk about that are probably more professional, but but because I'm just fresh off a flight from Kenya and India, and I spent 2 weeks in solitude and just reflecting and going through a different process. Then I spent 2 weeks working with women and girls in Kenya around pitching their business plans. And so what you're saying right now is just magnified for me at another level, just at this moment in time. And so I'm curious for you around what was the journey like to getting to know yourself? Did that start at a really young age for you, or did it click when you were in your 20s? Or has it clicked yet? Where are you on the continuum of being all that you are? And then what has that process been like?
Yeah, I think very early on, my dad, and I was 4 years old, and I credit him with so much of who I am as a woman. He sat me down and said, I was a little shy, if you could imagine it. Most people can't imagine I was a little shy. And he asked me, why are you shy? Why are you a little hesitant? And I was I don't know, this and that. And he said, you were born at this moment in time to be who you are for this world. To deny us is to deny yourself, is to deny us the gift that God gave to us when you were born. And so there is no need to hold that back. There's no need to be shy about that. You are going to be who you are. And sometimes people are going to love it, and sometimes they aren't. But that doesn't mean you deny the gift to the world. And so being 5 years old, I didn't fully appreciate that. And you get into middle school, you get into high school, and everybody's trying. Everybody's I'm an original. Everybody's trying to conform to one another, right? I'm going to compete the same way you compete. I'm going to climb the ladder the same way you've climbed the ladder. And I've just known on my professional, my personal journey, that's not been my path. And, we talk about that, but my path has not been the traditional one. It has been one through different turns and twists. And so you have to be okay with that and like give yourself over that your contribution, your journey, your path, your walk is going to be very different than others. And you don't need to be them.
Yeah. How do you stay motivated to get back on the path, right? Like when those, those things hit you and imposter syndrome or,
Yeah.
these different things hit you, how do you get back on the path and say, oh, no, I am supposed to be here? And I guess that speaks to what I'm thinking about a lot right now is a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And just aligning, like understanding where you belong. Because I mean, you have been in not only just amazing positions, but some of them fairly high profile, right? I mean, like prior to this, you were the vice president of economic development for Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Health Center System. These are big responsibilities. You take them with so much like grace. Like, I've never seen you sweat. You just be just so even keel. What helps you kind of like get back on the path when you're
Yeah.
like things get a little wobbly?
Yeah. No, a really important point. One, I never sweat. I sweat all the time. I just maybe don't perspire like others. I'm sweating all the time. I am. I realize that most of this isn't about me. Right? When people come up against you, it's not about you. Many times it is not personal. It is about your walk, the way you. It's not about you though. And so I don't take things personally. None of this is personal. But if you're my mama, that might be personal. Somebody that loves me, that might be personal. But this is not personal. The second thing I would say that keeps me grounded is I have an amazing group of women that stand beside me. And so there are times when your energy runs low, when you need someone to whisper in your ears, and you better have the right people whispering in your ear. You better have people that speak life and not fear. You have to have people that are speaking, like breathing life into your dreams. And so I surround myself, it is probably the most important thing that I do. I surround myself with praying women, with praying men, with people who are big dreamers, that are optimists, that are hopeful, because otherwise you'll get taken off of the path, not because it's not your path, it's because people just can't dream that big. They're not dreaming that big, they're not that hopeful, and they also aren't speaking life all of the time. And I remember this quote, it's in my bedroom, like, I specialize in the impossible. I know like everything I do is a risk. It's all on faith.
Mm.
And the good news is I'm not doing it by myself. So that's how I sort of orient myself, position myself, so that I just stay focused and moving forward.
What does it mean to be the global head of philanthropy for the North America region for JPMorgan Chase? What does that work look like? What is your day to day? What are the big decisions that you have to make constantly? What does your work look like?
Well, it's to be a part of a team that thinks about the transformational nature of this firm in communities across North America, so the United States and Canada. I have colleagues that sit in 40 different, across 40 different markets in the United States and cover those to really think about what are the tools from policy, from strategy, to go deep and long with all the firm's resources, not just our philanthropic resources, but our firm, our business practices, and drive impact and outcomes in those communities centered on four central areas: jobs and skills, neighborhood development, financial health, and then our small business portfolio.
How do you so we talked about thinking big,
Mm-hmm.
right? And are you surrounded by all big thinkers, or do you run into some people who like you recognize you're like, yeah, you're probably not thinking big enough, and then do you let them go? Like the path. So many times I get asked about how do you find mentors, how do you find the right circle. My book is all about networking and that kind of thing. I'm interested in your sort of networking mo over the course of your career, and who do you keep, who do you let go, where do
Yeah.
you meet the people that you decide to? Is it just work related? Or these sound like people that have become like friends and colleagues over time that maybe you met in different circles? Do you join different groups? Do you launch your own groups? How does your networking work?
So I network with not with a strategy, but more with a feeling and a gut feeling and an energy. Um, and so I don't follow titles, right? Titles tell you nothing about people because that's today. That's not tomorrow because that stuff can switch up real quick. Um, so I don't follow titles. So if you want to come to me and you say I'm the global head, I mean, it means something, but it doesn't mean that much because, you know, only both of our experiences, we know people that have no degrees that sit in public housing projects that are geniuses and big thinkers
Mhm.
that just have never had access to the resources and the rooms that we have to be able to bring those things to life. So I really broaden myself with people who have shown outcomes that are driven by passion, that have good hearts, that also when you can tell when you talk with someone, are they a no person? Are they a
Mhm.
person that dims it down? And let me also say, so I have people that I come in contact with, both professionally, within organizations, outside of organizations. And I can realize they've been stunted because of the people they've been around. They
Mm.
have ideas that they've been told, too big, too audacious. And you know what they start doing? They start scaling back. They start scaling back what they believe is possible and what's also going to make people comfortable. We are engaged in disruptive work. We are engaged in things that are challenging systems that are in place not to serve sometimes you or me. And so, if you are going to challenge those systems, those policies, those things that are holding people back, you're going to be in disruptive work. You have to be surrounded by people that are fearless,
Mhm.
people I think that have a faith walk. I think people that are big dreamers. And if you aren't in that way, I don't throw anybody away. I just don't think that's my thing. What I will do is I limit the ability for you to impact the mission
Mm.
because we're going to
I
stay
like
on
that.
mission and we're going to stay on assignment. And so if you want to disrupt the assignment, you want to not let us stay on mission, you actually don't get to be a part of that.
Mm. I love like not throwing anybody away because I think like we think about it so stark in the
Yeah.
like be not be with me. I can't talk to you anymore. Like versus the like limiting your impact, like limiting your impact on my mission.
Yes.
I love that. So you had a chance to be a part of the launch of the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund in Miami. And you
Yes.
mentioned in a post that you feel very blessed to measure your work not in the miles you'll travel, but the impact you get to see. Tell us the story of one of the moments you have been most proud of yourself and the impact you made on an organization or in a project, or your entrepreneurial life or business life.
I tell this story. It was a story that stems from when I was at Johns Hopkins. I was doing a series called Entrepreneurship Matters, and I had a designer come on the show, an interior designer. Um, and on that show, I said, I always ask, what could we do to help you? And every entrepreneur talks about a network. Give me access to people. Give me access to this. And so we left that show, and probably a week later, the head of the Weinberg Foundation calls me, and she said, Alicia, I'm looking for particularly a, I want to utilize a Black designer to design our libraries that go into schools and in communities across the country. She said, you have any names? And I said, you know what? I know of 2 women who are designers that I'd love to introduce you to. Their company's called K&J Designs. So I introduced them to her. They then become the designer for all of the Weinberg libraries across the country.
Oh my
I
God.
think that's shadow work, right? That's work that's not going to get you on the front page in New York. That's not, it is really, really critical to use our platform and our network to do something. I don't get any money out of that. I don't get anything other than seeing a business thrive because of the introduction I can make. That's power. That's impact. That's I think that's really important. And I think the ability to take that to scale, to introduce people who don't have just the phone number to call, to allow for really catalytic and impactful business to happen. That ultimately, those are children in our community that are going to have a library designed by 2 Black women from West Baltimore. What a beautiful story.
Wow.
So that's one of them. I have so many stories, but that's one that's recent that still gives me chills.
I love that because how do you scale that? I think that's something that we think about deeply about our ventures. It's just like, how do we scale the opportunity for people to meet? One of the things we do is a customer discovery blitz where it's like a 2-hour event where we connect like 50 internal employees to like 25 of our women in our community. Mentoring programs don't usually work at scale. So what we've used is we now let them, they pitch, but the corporate employees just giving feedback as if they were a customer. They're not necessarily, you don't have to have a specific expertise, because in expertise, the people get all, well, I don't know if I'm qualified, right? And then they don't join the mentoring. So it's been super successful. And we've, through that, been able to have people pitch to people that and get feedback in ways that they have grown their business tremendously. And I think about it often. How do we scale it? Because that is the first thing people say.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just can you connect me to the right person?
Correct.
Sometimes they don't know if they're ready. Sometimes you may not know if they're ready. I think when you find the people that are ready and the opportunity that is ripe, it is like perfect, and it is a boom. Like yes, 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 and yes. And I think so in your work, I'm interested in your thoughts around scale, because you have been at this place of like infusing opportunity for people to grow massively.
Yes.
Right? Like in the work you do now and in the work that you've done at Johns Hopkins. What are some takeaways that we could maybe, because I don't expect for us to have all the answers today.
Yeah.
But what are some, from your work, what are some key elements where you're like, this change can happen, this change in the world can happen? What have you seen that are some key elements to make that change consistent and maybe potentially scale what change can look like in communities and economic development?
Yeah. I think really great question. I think one, you have to have the right people in the seat, because there are a million ways to say this isn't possible. Too hard. Not at the scale. Not easy. We do hard things all the time. That's why people make billions of dollars really figuring out really hard things. I think the question of like, how do you get a business into a supply chain, right? That is operating at, I would say the 5,000 unit, right? And you know that to be able to get into a business of a JPMorgan size, let's just take toilet tissue. That's easy for you to wrap around.
Wait, hold that thought, right? Because I just realized we got to go to a break. So, how do you get a business into a supply chain? That's a perfect way to go into the second segment. So, everybody, y'all keep it locked right here. We're going to answer that question after this. How do you get a business into a supply chain? The question we left off from the last segment, which I think is like a big one, is how does a business get into the supply chain, right? And what does that look like? So I want to pick up from there, Alicia. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Likewise to you too. Um, Businesses get into supply chain. One, I think you have to have the right people in the supply chain, right? And I think you have to have people that are creative or hopeful, because the traditional way to get into supply chain is to buy from big box. So you to disrupt, to insert yourself in a supply chain is a disruptive engagement. I think a couple of things have to be done. One, um, we talk about capital to businesses, the ability to perform at the level that will allow for you to compete with a multi-billion-dollar business, to be a part of their supply chain, is a journey. Right, to build up the ability to supply, to fulfill that order. And so I think that, one, we have to really think about, how do we infuse capital to allow for that growth to happen? How do we also allow for there to be collective co-op opportunities for those who supply? So, I always talk about this company. I love buying from this company, Lord Tush, Black owned, woman owned, toilet tissue company. So how does she compete with a Charmin, right? How could Lord Tush collectively be with three other manufacturers and be able to fill at the rate of a Charmin, right? That allows for them to enter into the business. One, they need capital. One, they need also the support to do collective, to do JV. You do JV in many other contexts. If you looked at the construction context, people do JVs all the time to fulfill a job. In the supply chain piece, how do we allow for JVs? How do we also, I think, some of the work that's being done by Project Black, with Aerial Ventures, you know, changing over companies to allow for them to now be owned by individuals. And I think we think about that in terms of succession planning for businesses that, you know, are now going to transfer, and they may not have a transferee, to align with those who are um, who may have a smaller company, to allow for that to happen. I think there's some creative ways that those in the supply chain see can be helpful to businesses, and helping them to sort of demystify, how do you actually get into our business? How do you get into our supply chain and all the things that we purchase as a business?
No, I love that. A couple of things for those listening. Stands for joint venture. And Project Black, what they're doing in aerial investments is they are buying the companies that have been sitting squarely as the supplier for long periods of time, and then changing the leadership over to be Black leadership, or leadership of people of color, which is like such a huge thing to do, because another thing around the supply chain is when people get their favorite, they get their favorite.
That's
So
right.
that's why I love that you said like getting to the supply chain is a disruptive process, because I think if we view it that way, then you have a lot less hurt feelings about not getting in some way. You know that you're chipping away, or like really trying to get into something that is someone like stable and consistent, and people already have trust there. So
That's
you
right.
know that you have more work to do. So like, yes, having a great product is one thing, excuse me, but like also having that great product and knowing that you need to find the trust. So with the customer discovery blitz thing that we do, is also like, how do we get you in front of more corporate employees? Because when those corporate employees know who you are and they're like, oh, develop trust with you, they'll buy from you. And then you
Correct.
have an opportunity to disrupt. So some of that connection piece is key. So I do have a question around that.
Sure.
What about, and I never thought about it from a JV standpoint. So I made a note of that, because I'm like, oh wow, yeah, like that. When I was doing supplying like merchandise, like custom merchandise, I never thought about going into a JV I thought about subcontracting, because that's what people tell you.
Yes.
Right. But people don't necessarily tell you about going into a JV where like maybe you offer one part, I offer one part,
That's right.
but now we develop this entity that can go in and service, and now I have my opportunity to grow. I feel like that needs to be instituted as much as possible. Like, I don't even know that people are thinking that way.
Oh, yeah. I would see it a lot in the construction context, right? I'm an electrical company. I have 10 10 employees. You're an electrical company, you have 15. Neither one of us is going to get the job because the job requires 25. The two of us come together and now we win the job. And we now split the profits, and we now are able to compete at a different level. And maybe we won't JV on every job, but that job demanded a company that could fulfill. That's not personal. It just is the job, right?
Right.
No emotion in it, right? It's just the job. I need 25 people. It's just like if you had a catering job. I have a catering job, right? I need 25 servers. You have 5 servers. I can love you all day, but I need 25 servers. So unless you can give me 25 servers, it's not personal, right? It's what the job demands. So if you can go and JV, hey, friend, and we've done this in our history all of the time. We have thought about, let me split the contract. We've done it all the time. The neighborhood caterer. You do the mac and cheese, I'll do the fried chicken, and we all come together and we'll be able to service that. We've done it all the time. We just haven't thought about it in these larger contexts to be able to fulfill the job or the needs.
So what do you think about, and the recent, if you can comment on this at all, I don't want to throw this in there as a curveball, but a lot of companies made big commitments to racial equity. And now we have the different rulings and things coming across from the Supreme Court, which is super unfortunate. Do you think that will have a big impact? Because right now, like the way it's written, it doesn't necessarily impact corporations. But do you think that the overarching landscape of philanthropy and how people think about spending their corporate dollars, do you think it will have an impact on us eventually? I think that's something that me as a nonprofit that works in this realm of racial equity and other businesses working or other nonprofits working in this realm are wondering, should we be thinking about? Like, we have to think about it, of course, but like if we work with corporations and philanthropy deeply, will this somehow affect us one day?
Yeah, I not going to specifically comment on the Supreme Court case. I will comment more globally about racial equity and sort of what I think of as like a tiding and a shift and all those things. What I would say is that, just like I said to individuals, you have to be yourself as quickly as possible. The same for you as a nonprofit. What pains me, you as a business, what pains me is to see nonprofits contort themselves to be what they believe someone else wants them to be when they have came to that work because of a felt need, that they knew, that they had data, they have a whole set of experiences that tells them this is the work. Why do you depart from the work? Because I wave $1 at you. Then it must not have been the work. Stick with the work. And people will be drawn to the authenticity, to the power, to the impact. Continue to impact communities. Continue to do the work. And don't contort yourself because the headline of the day says you can't say Black, or you can't say woman, or you can't. That's the headline of the day. That's not the work. Stay focused on the work, the mission, the assignment. And those who love it they're going to continue to give you money. Those who don't, they never were going to give you money. They never were going to support you. Like, be real about that. They never were going to do anything other than lip service. They never were going to do anything. They were never into anything but performative work. So you keep doing real work. Keep doing substantive work. Keep staying on mission. And I'm not saying ignore it, but that doesn't disrupt what brought you to that work.
I think that's right. And I think one thing I will add to that is to innovate doesn't mean to contort, right? And I think that what happens is like the threat is perceived. Correct. That like you're gonna lose this money from these entities that you work with, or you got, especially like if you founded the thing. So sometimes being the founder of the nonprofit, this is when that kind of gets in the way as well, because the lifespan. It's
Yes.
almost like your mom knew you when you wore a onesie, and
Yes.
now she knows you when you wear a size 15, 16. You know what I mean? Like, and then she knows you when you wear. So I think like she could see that whole journey, and
Yes.
so her way of protecting you
Mhm.
sometimes actually can get in the way of your progress. And so
Right.
I think that, like, as a founder, you have to stay innovative in your thinking. You have to be willing to move, budge, shift, listen to wise counsel,
Yes.
develop wise counsel, and go after funding in places that you wouldn't have normally thought it would be.
That's right.
I
That's right.
mean, the traditional places sometimes may be affected by the bigger, large headlines of the day, but like, okay, great. Where else is there? You know,
Absolutely. And there are families. So we think about like there are families and individuals, and the landscape of philanthropy has changed. The landscape of these businesses have changed. You have different people in seats of power who are tuned deeply to what's real, who are craving impact, who are craving real outcomes. And so I think that's, I don't think, I say stay on mission. Um, don't retreat, stay on mission.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Could you share any specific initiatives or projects that you have coming up that you're really excited about?
Oh, this is gonna be quiet. This is quiet. Um, One, I think what's really neat is that we are undergoing, and we've been doing this for years, so this predates me, so I'm not taking credit for it. But really being focused about our philanthropy. You can spread yourself like peanut butter, or you can be focused and you can think about all of the tools that you have in your toolbox to drive solutions. And so I think that's really exciting to be able to be solution oriented in our philanthropy rather than um, measure yourself by the ribbon cutting and the big check that's given out. Like, what did that solve in that neighborhood? How did that contribute to that business or that community? The other thing is an initiative I'm working on deeply around legacy. And we always talk about the transfer of wealth. We always talk about intergenerational wealth, but how do we fund and infuse and even business succession, right? You have a business, how does that get transferred to the next generation? And my legacy initiative is to transfer wealth. I think we've talked about poverty. We haven't talked about wealth quite enough. And we haven't invested in those things that will allow for wealth to take place. And also to stabilize our neighborhoods. How do we allow for the house that your grandmother worked tirelessly to be able to have for your family? How do we make sure that that block doesn't drastically change unless she wants it to?
Right, right.
So those are just some of the things I'm working on. Really excited, and we're also working on a big Women of Color initiative, um, which I'm really excited about what that will take shape and look like in the coming weeks and months.
How do you define wealth? Like, I think that when people there's this idea of rich,
Yes.
right? People see the flashiness of hip hop stars and TV personalities, and they're like, oh, they're rich. So, and in reality, like, some of these people really are not as maybe wealthy as it looks, right? And then the people who are more quiet, that you're like unassuming, don't think about, are like super wealthy. So like I think that we have a distorted view of what it means to have wealth, and
Yeah.
especially right now because of the internet. So like, how would you define wealth? How does a person know if they're wealthy or not wealthy? Or, and it's wealth, like, what is the goal? Okay, that's a lot of questions in one. So let's start with, how do you define yourself as wealthy or striving to be there?
Yeah. So one, there definitely is a spectrum, right? And it's geographically tied, all those. But how do your assets work for you? So do you work for your assets or are the assets working for you? It's really like a very simplistic definition. Do you have physical assets that can transfer? Do you have liquidity? Do you have an ability to have growth that you actually aren't actively engaged in? And are your expenses at a point where they're not outweighing your revenue that you're bringing in? Um, the goal is to really be able to pass that down to another generation. Many times, what we pass the next generation is debt. We, in the form of liens, of credit card loans, of assets that look like assets but actually are underwater. And so, how do we transfer to that next generation and allow for them to be better off financially, to have a different starting point financially than our generation was able to have? And I think that's the goal. The goal is to be able to have security. That's what wealth is about. It's about being able to make decisions without knowing that the floor will actually fall out from under you.
I think a lot of us would tell that the biggest asset is for you to get a house, right? Like grow up, get a house.
Yeah.
Everybody get a house. If you got a house, then you're. What are some really quickly, like what are some assets that are not houses that come to mind? Art. Yes.
Art. You can loan against art.
Mm.
You can transfer art. Art's an asset that people don't think about. Commercial real estate. You can gift commercial real estate. One of the nonprofits that I'm working with here in JPMorgan was gifted a building from a philanthropist.
Wow.
Commercial real estate. There's people of course have boats and real estate and all sorts of things, but art's one that people don't typically think about. And the art that really is particularly valuable are some that are made by people in our community that we saw on the rise. So if you can buy their artwork when they are coming up, if you bought an Amy Sherrill when Amy was just starting, or Basquiat when Basquiat was just starting, like, you are really talking about wealth at this point. An asset that you can loan against, you can sell and have revenue come into your family.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Well, we could talk all night. We can save the world in this one interview. But is there anything else that you would like to leave the people that we haven't quite yet? Any piece of advice on like dang, I can't even talk. Philanthropy or building wealth for their families that you would like to leave us with?
Sure. I would say sometimes we think that we have to be in a position of wealth to give, to be philanthropists. I think all of us, it is a habit. It's personal, and it's about your passion. And so if you are a young person and you say, of the $10 I save, I want to give $1 away, it's a habit that we should create within our community, and not with a mindset that this is charity. Because not charity. Is it philanthropy that ultimately is believing that that's an asset worthy of my philanthropic investment? And that's a people, place, or things. I think just having that mindset is really important as you are engaging in giving of yourself, giving of your time, of your treasure, of your valuables. The other thing I would just say to everyone is, just in this time, I feel like we are in really volatile times, really odd times. Kindness is underrated. Be kind. Like, send a note. Like, just uplift people at this moment in time. We have access to so many people, but people are so isolated. Like, just really be thoughtful about being kind and reaching out to folks. It's really important.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Alicia Wilson, the Managing Director and Global Head of Philanthropy for the North America region for JPMorgan Chase. and so much more. And just an amazing all around person. Thank you so much for your time today.